Hello and welcome to the Unthink Podcast. Today we'll talk about customer loyalty. I have with me Pratik Kodial, who's worked at JCPenney, Bestbuy, and Wipro, and has a good exposure with the brand loyalty programs. And I have Autumn Nazarian from Mindshare, and she's been working on partnerships and has been working with content and media and entertainment. So welcome both of you to the podcast. I'm looking forward to discussing customer loyalty with you.
Excellent.
Thanks for having us.
Yes. So let's start with, I'll just start with some questions. Autumn, you go first. What do you think of customer loyalty today, like compared to maybe, let's say 18 years ago?
Ooh, 18 years ago. And I should say I'm formally Mindshare before I start.
Yes.
Wow. So 18 years ago, I do think there was actually some loyalty out there. I was thinking about, some of the great loyalty programs, and I guess you could argue whether or not they're in fact loyalty programs or memberships or whatever, but I was thinking about AAA. And how 18 years ago, they were one of the people out there that from day one had an understanding that they had a great product, a multifaceted product. But in order to really have loyalty and to get people to pay that extra premium to have tow truck service and all the other things that they do, that they were looking at a larger canvas of what the consumer lifestyle was, right? And so they created partnerships everywhere. And all of a sudden, it wasn't a credit card, it wasn't American Express, but membership had its benefits. And I was thinking about that they were one of the very first, them and Discover Card, I think, with their cash back, et cetera. They were really thinking about why should a consumer be loyal to us? And when you think about, from back then to today with AAA, when people say I have AAA, they're not talking about the commodity or the service or even the utility. They're saying I feel safe on the road because I'm a member and I'm smarter than you because I get a discount everywhere I go. So I think of them as being one of, some of the first that were really thinking about, generosity and looking at a consumer as a whole person who has all these different actions in their lives that might, make sense in terms of bundling an experience and really giving them a concrete reason to be proud to be a member, to think about what that loyalty meant. And also a status symbol, right? I've got AAA, no problem. I got code for free, wink, wink, although you do pay for it. I think today loyalty is so different. I mean, the number one word that comes to mind is clutter, right? I mean, is there a company out there that doesn't have a loyalty program? I feel like when I buy random things off of Instagram that don't even have a brand name that I'll remember, the first thing that happens is I'm asked to join an email list for 20% off my first offer and my first purchase. And so I think there's just a glut now. I mean, loyalty programs are expected. Consumers actually expect a brand to give you something for free or give you a value in exchange for that initial purchase. And I think historically, I've always heard that loyalty is 3 purchases or more. You can say you're brand loyal, depending on the industry, I'm sure. But, everyone does that now. So how do you differentiate if everybody is being generous and rewarding? And I think the answer is trust, a great experience, and probably shared values.
Great.
I think it's a great, so love all that you said. I may have slightly differing opinion on your start, but actually agree to everything else. And so what I mean by that is, if it's okay, Tina, to jump in. I personally don't think that the construct of loyalty has changed over time. I think the messaging and how you approach the customer the technology, those aspects are, of course, have changed. The clutter that you talked about that exists more in this world than back 18 years or whatever time ago. The actual construct of loyalty, in my opinion, as far as the customer is concerned, hasn't changed at all, right? And what do I mean from that perspective? At the end of the day, if for the customer, the brand or the retailer or whatever their interaction they may be having, if you will, if that brand or the retailer is top of mind consideration when they're thinking of making the purchase, I think that defines to a large extent loyalty in many ways in the context of where they want to shop or spend their dollars, right? I mean, and that hasn't changed. And to your point, I think you talked about trust, experience, shared values. That hasn't either changed either, right? I mean, and those were as relevant back 18 years, 20 years, 40 years, whatever the case may be, and for that matter, even today. And if you think about all the disruptors that existed over time, right? I mean, so if you think about, and I'm just going to name a few, if that's okay, Tina and Autumn. If think about Walmart, right? Walmart came in as an absolute nobody when Sears was the absolute biggest retailer in the world at the time, and definitely in the US. And they disrupted with a consistent, simple message of low prices, everyday value that is consistent even as of today, right? Now you have the latest player, if you want to call it Amazon, that came in the late 90s and obviously got a lot larger over time. They continue to add to some extent. I love the AAA example that you provided. To some extent, continue to add value, partnerships, things like that, added Prime, free delivery, etc., right? And they continue to do that over time. They tried a few other things that did not work. But at the end of the day, what they've tried and done and changed the industry is great online experience, fast shipping, and some other things that come along with Prime, which is a Prime Video and so on and so forth. Now they did a deal with Grubhub, right? So they're continuing to try to add value. So at the end of the day, I think having that trust with the customer, I think is paramount. Having a great customer experience is paramount. And yes, of course, shared values are really, really important, especially in today's world. They were important back in the day, but I think they're even more in today's world. And I think that your point out, and agree with all of that that you said. And that's where I feel that the construct of loyalty hasn't changed. The way we communicate our messaging in the current clutter that exists within the online world, it has, right? And how do we make that happen even better?
Yeah. And I would just say that I agree with you. Those tenets haven't changed, but maybe the way that they're expressed is a little bit different. I mean, if you think about shared values, there were very few companies, I think, back in the 90s and 2000s that were necessarily thinking about how they showed up in terms of social causes, in terms of operations practices, transparency. And so I do think there's been an evolution there on what shared values means. I think at one point in time, it could just be that, they were an optimistic company with optimistic marketing.
Yes.
But now it definitely has to go deeper than that. And, because in a lot of ways, the brands that you choose to be loyal to say a lot about who you are as a person, for better or worse.
Yeah,
totally. I like what you said, Autumn, about the self-expression part that is, I think, much more prominent today than it used to be, right? I mean, I think traditionally it used to be like a top-down thing where people look up to brands and follow brands and sort of admire the ads. And, I remember growing up, we used to remember every single ad we saw. And nowadays, we don't so much idolize brands as much as we did. But everybody is more bothered about themselves today and how they are seen. So I think to some extent, loyalty has shifted from, the word loyalty itself, in my opinion, is slightly outdated because loyalty means like allegiance, right? It implies that you're expecting, it's a little bit of a expectation that someone has to be allegiant to you and not go towards others. While right now, what I feel loyalty should have a new meaning or even a word, because it's more like, do you resonate? Does your personality resonate with mine? Do I speak your language? Do you like to belong to my community? So it's more like you're giving the customer room to express themselves. So if I say I buy from Walmart or I buy from Target, that tells something to you about me as a person. Am I looking for like low cost products, or am I looking for something else from Target, right? So I think that's expression of your personality is, especially among the Gen Z and the younger generation, I feel that expression has taken a higher prominence. And that's also because of the clutter, like you said, Autumn, that there's a clutter. There's so much. Everybody is trying to be heard, while the individual themselves want to be heard. So
I think, and don't you think the biggest shift is data, right? I mean, from the brand point of view, when you think about the AAAs and the Sears and whatnot, when loyalty was first, coming out, we didn't have digital in the way we do today. But really, I mean, loyalty is a retention tool, but it's data, right? And so now, I feel like we're going to say that word 1,000 times as we go through this conversation, but that wasn't necessarily a key component of loyalty in the past. And now it's maybe the only thing that matters except for experience and shared values.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm a data guy myself, so it's hard for me not to agree with it. But I just want to kind of put a slightly differing view, if that's okay, right? If you think about Walmart, right, they did not have a true loyalty program and became the largest retailer in the world without a loyalty. I mean, they have one now, but back in the day, just a few years earlier as well, right? I mean, there's no loyalty program where you buy some, I give you some, right? I mean, I think what is really important for a brand or for a retailer, as an example, I think, is to stay consistent in their value message and continue to deliver that value in the changing world, right? So, and that value continues to change in the changing world in that sense, right? I mean, so, and sorry, I immigrated in the US in 2004, so I know AAA, but I've not been a member of it per se, and I don't see so much value as much as probably other individuals saw. So I'm just giving you my experience, though I'm very familiar with what AAA is. And so what I mean by that is, unless the organization is extremely consistent and continues to evolve on the value proposition, they will falter over time. Sears did. In my view, AAA does. That's my view. Again, I've not necessarily followed them, but over time. And that's how I see it. I think loyalty programs are important. But I think all loyalty programs have failed to evolve. And what I mean by that is, if you think about Kohl's, Macy's, et cetera, on most of the loyalty programs tend to all believe in make certain amount of transactions from a dollar standpoint. I'll give you some dollar back, right? Or I'll give you a little bit of free shipping if you cross so much dollars. They're all revolving around a little bit of value. And that has stayed, unfortunately, consistent since the beginning of the program. The only pieces that typically change is how much money, right? Is it $250 a year, $500 a year, and a little bit here and there? And those retailers, more often than not, in my opinion, haven't succeeded either. They've just failed to succeed because they haven't evolved, in my opinion.
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
If you I think I totally agree with you. I mean, to me, when I think about it in my head, that consistency is it's a brand message and a promise and consistency that people can rely on. Whereas, rewards and seasonal offerings come and go, and they definitely shoot up in terms of immediate revenue. But in the long run, it's that consistency that goes, I think, highest on the chart, because people know what to expect. And when brands break that for whatever reason, we've definitely seen brands that were very cheeky and funny and humorous, and then all of a sudden they decide they're going to do something really serious and really upscale because they're trying to get another audience
segment.
Then you see a backlash, right?
Exactly. Abercrombie was one, came out on the other side on the value proposition, etc. So agreed.
Yeah, and Pratik, to your point about it being purely transactional, right? It started out being only about transactions and money and cost saving. I think right now there's so much more happening. Like one major difference that I see today is the consumer has moved on from there are consumers, then there are influencers, and then there are creators. So there are initially consumers who just consume and they just, it's like a one-way streak. The second step is that, okay, influencers are suggesting, and the Gen Z is following influencers. They don't even care about brand. They just care about the influencers, right? And then the third step is that influencers are now becoming so popular that they start creating their own brand, and they're trying to build a following, so much to the extent that the latest in influencer marketing on Instagram is something called whitelisting, where the brand tries to get the influencer to use their audience rather than the brand's social media, right? So it's like they're trying to tag on to the influencers following because they're not able to create their own following that is as interesting or as engaging. I think that comes from the fact that a lot of brands are just about products and purchases, while influencers have something unique, some character that becomes interesting for people to follow. So what do you say, Autumn? Maybe in terms of sports marketing, what do you say about this?
Well, I've worked with all kinds of influencers and celebrities. I think a lot of times celebrities have a little bit more space to advertise and to create branded content about a brand without backlash. They're also usually vetted a little bit, more easily vetted because they've been in the public eye for a while. Using athletes, using celebrities for brand messages, I think there's an acceptance there that these are professionals. I think what is difficult about influencers is getting that perfect balance of an influencer who has skyrocketed to popularity because of their authenticity, which, I hate that word, but it's true. People are there because they love that person. And it is much more difficult for just a regular person who just happens to be famous for who they are and what they do on social media to deliver a brand message without it feeling very inauthentic. I think the best influencer driven, brand loyalty campaigns are ones where there are collaborations, where the influencer has a voice, where their community can actually cheer them on for their success. Because even when, as you say, influencers are given the ability to make their own videos for brands, those are sometimes some of the best, absolutely. And I don't mean to be a naysayer at all, because influencer marketing is incredibly powerful. But then you have a lack of brand control. And so I think that from an industry perspective, you have this tension where we've just talked about how brands need to be consistent and they need to have a consistent voice. And when you let go of that and let somebody else suddenly make a brand message for you, you can have incredibly creative results that resonate, and you can have disasters. And so I think the trick really is that influencers are rewarded for being themselves and doing what they do. And that's why they have these communities. And so the brand message almost has to be concurrent with something that shows that influencer is authentically getting to do something that they would want to do, that they would want to create. And I think Pinterest and TikTok, you're especially seeing that those are really fertile places for those types of successes, because organically, those are places that people go to share ideas.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a receptive difference there where, if I go to Pinterest, I'm not going to be surprised if someone is telling me about something they love, because that's literally why the site exists.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point, Autumn, because I think influencers is an important and a key part, but I think brands cannot kind of stay away from their kind of consistent value messaging or consistent messaging in terms of what they believe, and let go of all of that to the influencer and assume that Gen Zs and whatever as the younger people come along, whatever the other terms that get used, they will just use influencers and nothing else. I think brands have to be very clear on what they stand for, even more important than when it ever was. As they work with all the channels, including the influencer, to propagate their message and things like that. But yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, there's always a slippery slope, right? I mean, it needs to be authentic in the context of influencers. As soon as it is not, your brand gets attached to that as well. So if you think about a few examples, I mean, Tiger Woods was one a few years back, right? I mean, and Nike had to, and others had to kind of move away from that. So, but at the same time, when things are going in the right direction, everything looks good. So I do believe, and I think it's an important aspect and facet of marketing and using influencers, but I don't think it'll ever end up to be the only one. And it does not let the brand stay away from their consistent messaging.
So Pratik, so what do you think brands can do more now to bump up the loyalty, basically to evolve their loyalty program, right? Where do you think they can go?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at an interview, and it depends on what kind of a retailer or brand that is, right? So, and there is a difference, and you can't be the same. So, I'm going to give two extreme examples, and one I'll take Tiffany, right? They don't stand for low price, but when a certain occasion comes in, there are individuals who would want to buy stuff only from Tiffany's for their partner because it carries a certain brand value and things like that. In the same instance, I'm going to use Coke and I'll use a low price Costco, right? Each of them. So if I'm a Coca-Cola Coke drinker, I'm not looking for Pepsi ads and searching in the store. So my brand has resonated in a way that no matter how much clutter you put on Pepsi with me, I'm not going to buy that, right? I'm going to look for Coke. So coming back to your question of what brands or retailers can do, I think firstly they need to identify themselves and understand what are they standing for. That is very, very critical because more often than not, the ones who tend to struggle are the ones who are trying to follow others rather than following their inner voice, right? I think that's the biggest problem. If you can find out what you stand for, then the intent. Now the question is, how do you execute on that? That's number one. Second, which typically tends to exist for your traditional retailers, and this is what has changed in the current world. The traditional retailers and if you think about apparel, tend to be in the 40 plus margin range, whereas now you have Shein, SHEIN, an online Chinese retailer coming at a low margin, right? So you now have created a SG&A structure, or basically a cost structure that you cannot accommodate the current to the current environment. What does that mean? Why is it so important? Suddenly, if your SG&A or your cost structure is at 30%, which is typically for most apparel retailers, whereas in Chinese companies are working at 15%, you are done. It's just a matter of time. You either accommodate to that cost structure or call it quits over a period of time, because that's what will happen, right? And why is that important? Because it is not allowing you to invest into other areas that are important to the customer, right? And evolve your loyalty program, evolve things that require investment. And so coming back to your question of what companies need to do, inner voice, what do they stand for? How do they evolve their cost structures, if at all there is an issue with that, to match the current environment? What values can they bring to the customer that is just not the same, which is, you spend so much, I'll give you a little back in return. That is not going to cut it, because it's now table stakes. It may have been something great 20 years back. It is table stakes. It is not a game changer anymore. You have to do it, but that's not going to change loyalty. How do you use the partnership network, right? I mean, what AAA did back in the day and probably continues to do, but what AAA did back in the day, what Amazon's doing today, how do you add to that partnership network so that as the customers are shopping for gas, for shopping for something else, they see value across the board for them, for which they are being loyal. So I think there are a few steps that the retailer can take, but it's very hard to do. It's very hard to change the cost structure that you've got used to for 20, 40, 50 years. It is not very easy to do that.
Yeah, I think that one of the key points would be how well the retailer can involve the community. So there are two aspects there, right? One is what we were discussing about the larger celebrity influencers and finding the perfect match, right? You find the influencer that resonates exactly with your brand value so that it's authentic. That's the number one at a macro level. But then there's also a micro level. So today, for example, talking about data, if the brands could identify which people are actually talking about them and would not mind sharing, even if it's not on a large scale, right? It all adds up. It's like little drops add up. So what if you have someone in the family saying, hey, I love I love clothes at Macy's and I go there because of so and so. And then you invite your friends and go along, or you invite your parents and go. So that's influence at a micro level, and that's very powerful, because as far as I have studied the influencer campaigns, the micro influencers, even though they have like 10,000 to 20,000 followers, they're the ones that actually get much higher following and trust in terms of product purchase, because people, first of all, because people trust that what they're saying is true and not just an ad, or it's not just a branded sort of thing. So my belief, or my thought is that the brands should involve these guys. First of all, identify them, spot them using data. Second thing is harness that data to cultivate a following, and create a sort of reward system where they can actually reward these people. First of all, recognize and reward these people for carrying along their message.
I do think you see that a lot. It makes me think about family plans and bundle plans for telecommunications, or like a T-Mobile who does T-Mobile Tuesdays. These, to me, when you think about a loyalty program, it's like the first step is getting somebody to opt in, winning them over, making them a true loyalist, which I think is what you were talking about, Tina. And then you also have referrals, right? And so you do see so many loyalty programs, particularly in financial, where there's a very generous bonus, and in telecommunication and cable as well, to bring in friends and family, and to provide a high worth initial bonus to bring them in as a member. And I do think those are really powerful, because, as you say, Starbucks is always, one of the gold standards that people talk about. And they initially concentrated on those daily, multi-trip loyalists. And those people have the highest, status in their loyalty programs. And so those tiered programs where there are also referrals, and you can actually, be rewarded for bringing in friends and family, they're a loop, right? Because the more you have your friends and family using the brands that you use, the more, in a positive way, it's an echo chamber. And there's a term we used to talk about a lot in sponsorship, in-group bias, which is where you have a positive bias. If you perceive a brand or a sports team or a celebrity to be within your tribe or group, and you will give them more chances than you would give anybody else, because you have a positive bias. And so I do think that those more personalized, referrals, word of mouth, etc., are powerful, but they also speak to, again, identity.
Yeah, and the other thing I think, Tina, you talked about is community. I think that's one thing that some retailers miss out and others do a great job is just showing up and being there in within the community, trying to do activities and things of that nature that help the people around the store, around the region that they are there. And as I said, some do a great job and some kind of miss out a little bit on that, which I think is very important. And I think those things do resonate, in my opinion, over time with the customers in that particular area.
Yeah.
If I can jump in with one other one, I also think technology. We're living in a time where technology becomes obsolete. Sometimes it comes back. Did any of us think the QR code would be like where it is today? 10 years ago, we were kind of waving goodbye to it. And I do think you're seeing hardware companies like Apple who are rolling out new features on the phone that you carry with you everywhere, which is arguably the most powerful device for brands. Coming up with technology in the phone embedded that is actually replacing, some companies in terms of like point of sale or wallets or whatever it might be. And, you can't overlook the idea that, you have to keep an eye on changing technologies, right? I've worked with many clients that created apps for their loyalty programs, which I think is absolutely brilliant and smart. But there may come a time where you actually just opt into, the Apple loyalty program. I mean, Amazon has already created Amazon Moments, which is for their platform, but it's a turnkey, system for vendors to use data and create loyalty with real life and digital rewards. And so I do think that there's a lot of evolution happening in terms of technology.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah. And speaking of technology, I think there are many things that are coming up, like, for example, Web3. So Web3 is all about decentralization. So brands offering NFTs to customers for loyalty. So NFT is like a digital identity, right? It's like the new digital identity of a person. It's going to become like the only identity that a person would have that is permanent, right? Someone would have an NFT for everything. Like, I'm a member of AAA, I have a AAA NFT, I have a NFT from Reebok because I like Reebok shoes, Disney NFT. So it's like my collection of all my allegiances. There could be an NFT of my own, which I create because I stand for a charity or some cause. So one is handing out NFTs to people and making them feel special and belonging to a community. That's one part. Second thing is giving them a guarantee of some value, right? Because an NFT can only be useful if it's offering some value. It's not just a piece of art. Is there something associated, right? Why should I keep that NFT in my wallet? Maybe because I get some perks. Maybe because it's recognized wherever I go. And for example, I can go scan a QR code at a store, and the store can see that, hey, Tina's a special customer, I need to treat her differently, and they give me a special thing. I think the feeling of being special, and not like, hey, you're just throwing me 25% off, but what, everybody gets 25% off, and that you don't feel special about that. But when you know that you're recognized as an individual by a brand and given something exclusive to you, that makes you feel special and loyal.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I was just thinking about was gamification.
Yes.
And I actually think that's, I mean, you made me think about it when you were talking about Web3. Gamification is a huge component. What we used to always say when we'd work with clients that had a primarily male audience is, what do you do? Because men traditionally don't clip coupons, right? They're not thinking that way. They're not putting, and so now, you've got these loyalty programs that they're engaging the part of the brain that likes to gamble. And exactly to your point before, what happens when you gamble and you win? You feel special. You feel like a winner. You get a little drop of dopamine in your brain. But also, limited time offers, things like that, where you have to like complete an action, or and it may or may not be a purchase. It could be CVS used to do things where if you took a healthy action, you would get some points. But gamification creates an urgency, right? It creates an excitement that is different than, knowing that if you buy $100 worth of something, you're going to unlock a reward. And I also think just with gaming and, how we're all gamers now. I mean, I don't know anyone who isn't a gamer at this point, whether it's, Candy Crush or, a hardcore PC gamer or something. And so making it fun, making it something that feels like a game of chance, makes you feel special, makes you feel like you've truly been rewarded with something unexpected is very powerful as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've seen some great responses in the past doing some of that. So I do agree with that. I think that gamification aspect is really key, and I think the customers or the individuals do feel special when they get something different from what they're used to.
Yes, and even in the space of fashion, right? So nowadays, with the metaverse and the whole 3D and virtual reality coming up, the 3D fashion creators. So there's a whole new industry almost where the companies allow the individuals to create 3D fashions, and then they test the popularity of the fashions just through the consumer. and then they adopt the best fashion and then actually put only those into production. So it's actually a cost saving method, because you're first of all involving the community by letting them create. So you're making them bring their friends and their following to look at these 3D designs. You're getting the customer's pulse, because you're experimenting at low cost without actually producing the products first. And finally, when you put that design in production, imagine the delight of the person who created it. So you're creating like a permanent brand ambassador who's going to take your brand further ahead. So that's a really super interesting space as well coming up now.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I haven't personally had experience with that space as yet, per se, but I think with the use case that you mentioned, I think it could be quite powerful, because at the end of the day, I think if you think about fashion retail, right? I mean, the time from conceptual idea to actual product being on the floor could be anywhere between 6 to 8 months, right? And there's so much changes, as we all know, and we've seen in the last few years itself.
Yeah.
That what you ordered 6 to 8 months back may be completely irrelevant, or the market conditions have completely changed, right? So I think what you're saying sounds really, really powerful. I personally not had experience with that space per se, so I'm not sure how that comes to fruition, but I think it's a powerful use case.
Yeah.
And it's using, I mean, it's including the consumer in product development. It makes me think about Lay's potato chips here in the States. I don't know if they do it everywhere, but every year now they will have a huge contest and have people, basically throw out exotic and flavorful ideas. And then they pick 3 and put them out as a limited edition, and then use that almost as an election to showcase, which flavor, was the most popular, which sold the most, which in turn becomes a bit of a competition for people who are, loyalists to one of the new and wild flavors. So I think that that's really interesting. I also think, people talk a lot now about zero-party data versus first-party data. Zero-party data really just means that you're actually asking your customers what they want, what they like, what they don't like, where are the pain points, how could you make their experience more seamless? And it's old school, right? It makes you think of Nielsen and the notebooks. And sometimes what people tell you they want isn't actually what they want. And that's why first and third-party data is so powerful, because you can look at how that matches their actual behavior. But it's a powerful tool, and you can create great brand ambassadors that are consumers by asking them what you could be doing better and then actually taking action.
Yeah. I agree. I think one of the things that we may or may not have touched as much on in the context of loyalty is experience. I know, Autumn, you talked a little bit about it in the beginning itself in terms of trust, experience, and shared values. But I think experience is another thing that is extremely critical. And what I mean by that is from a customer standpoint, I mean, loyalty is long-term, right? I mean, in that sense, it's a long-term relationship that we're building, or the brand is building with the customer. And if there's a bad experience, a real bad experience, not a small, very, very bad experience, that typically ends up staying with the customer. And that could basically kill loyalty, if you will, for that particular brand. And I think that's another area that the retailers or brands need to continue to invest in, right? And that it does require investment, because technologies have changed, right? So and usually what happens is, if you have great experience in Amazon from an online standpoint, that's your new normal for you across all online retailers, right? Or for that matter, a great store experience with an Apple store. That's what you like in other stores as well. Things of that nature. I'm just taking 2 examples here, but I think customer experience is something that sometimes gets overlooked by retailers or sometimes brands across, as compared to some of the other big ones, but I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think I really like your point, Pratik, about the new normal piece of it, right? The bar is always moving up, because people start expecting what they didn't have even 1 year back. They get used to it. Like, for example, the gaming industry, right? So the gaming industry has always been on the forefront of experience because they always had to cope up with high speeds and super performance and make sure that people stuck around for hours together on the game. And now with the metaverse experience coming with Facebook, all of these guys putting their weight behind it, it's very possible that that becomes the new normal in a few years. And even today, Roblox, for example, has about 40 million daily active users. And now they're trying to see how to monetize that audience. So I was talking to a teenager the other day, and she's like, hey, I built my own store at Roblox. And she was explaining how she lays the wall and what sort of virtual products she puts there. And the moment I told her, what if you had a real store inside Roblox? She just like went crazy. She's like, wow, do you really, like, can I buy real products from my store? Can I sell real products here? So it's all about first of all getting the community involved, even the youngsters, and then bumping up the experience, because I think experience is important because you're creating memories, right? So like you said, a bad memory, I mean, humans have a tendency to remember bad things more. We're wired for bad memories, so bad memory can stay forever. And good experiences have to keep scaling up because you forget or you take those for granted. So,
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, in fact, I think you and I had a conversation, Tina, a little bit about Roblox. So I was talking to my daughter since I mean, I'm a technology guy, but not all technologies in that sense. So I have zero. I mean, I know what Roblox is. I know what the stocks are and stuff like that. But when I talked to my daughter, who's actually a Roblox player or whatever, she uses the game. She was very excited to show things to me, right? Because I've never myself gone in and seen Roblox. So she was kind of showing it to me in terms of what she can do and showing me different things that like clothes or I have some avatars, etc., etc. Which I think is pretty cool. I mean, the level of excitement I saw with her was pretty phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And bringing real experiences into environments like Roblox is very powerful too. We're seeing concerts, and I do think that when you talk about what are the kinds of loyalty that we're going to see with NFTs and with Web3, ironically, I think it's going to be some of these real life experiences that are fleeting, that aren't recorded for posterity, that aren't there forever. And that, that loyalty will be rewarded with a ticket, with a key to a door, and the ability to be a part of something that is happening there and then goes away, because those are many times the things that have the most value.
Right. Okay. I think we've covered all the topics. That was a great discussion. Thank you very much for your time.